Hello and welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast week in mobile games, where we discuss the big news of the week and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz, and on the podcast with me today is our news editor Aaron Astle. No Paige, no Oscar this week, just the two of us. So, listeners, you'll have to put up with us.
Hopefully, we won't have any tech issues. I think the last time we were alone.
Oh my gosh,
We had a few attempts at this.
Last time we were left on our own, it didn't go very well. So what have you been up to this weekend?
So probably the highlight for me, I spoke with Unity's VP of Product, Ryan Ellis, about Unity 6, and had a chat about a few different topics like the runtime fee and AI and all the hot topics really. But I'll save that for now and get into it a bit more later on. What about you?
Always looking forward to talking about the goings on at Unity, and the other big interview you had this week. That was really interesting as well. We'll get to that. For me, I mean, besides some work, I finally saw Alien Romulus. I enjoy the franchise so much, but for some reason I didn't see it in the cinema because I rarely go. But I stayed up till obviously midnight till it came out on Amazon and bought it, and streamed it straight away. I thought it was really good, or good. For me, there's such a high bar for Aliens 1 and 2, which are two of my favourite films ever, that I have unreasonable expectations now for the franchise. What it could do. So I think if they did like an amazing film, I'd still think like, I mean, it was all right. I very much enjoyed it. The stuff, especially like the first two thirds, I would say the stuff with the face huggers is brilliant. Actually, I have some issues with it. The main issue is just and all franchises do this when they reach a certain age. They cannot help but like. Some of the characters, the lines they say, they might as well just wink at the camera. It pulls you out of the experience so much. They're trying to build this big horror atmosphere. There's the aliens going around, like the facehuggers, the alien, and then it just pulls you out of it when they just really say a cheesy line multiple times from previous films, and so many franchises do this. It's like they can't. I get it. You have to kind of stay attached to what made the franchise kind of famous and those touch points that people expect. But there's got to be a better way than just relying on that and just rehashing the old stuff. Because other than money, what's the point? Maybe the point is just money. But I'm being really harsh because actually it's good. And then, of course, I don't know if we talked about it before, but Alien Isolation 2. Let's find it out. That is my favourite game ever, and I'm super excited. I cannot wait. So I'm looking forward to that. The Creative Assembly team, fantastic job on the first one. So I'm really glad that's announced. Hopefully, it's not like 5 years away or something. Hopefully, it's a bit closer, but no release date as yet. Just we're working on it. Right. So we'll get on with the news. But just before that, as always, a few shout outs. Remember, our top 50 is now out, so please check that out on the site. There's a link in the comments. The top 50 mobile game makers for 2024 is a list put together by ourselves. And events-wise, we've got Pocket Gamer Connects Jordan coming up on November 9th and 10th, and Pocket Gamer Connects London returns in January on the 20th to 21st. So please, if you're interested, check out those events. If you want to speak, fill in the speaker form. And we'll get in touch with you. So, the news. This week, there was quite a few... there's quite a lot of... So, we do our regular jobs roundup. And there were a few big stories. So, Supercell's Chief Marketing Officer, Fernanda Romano, has left the developer less than a year after she first joined. If you remember, she joined as CMO when they were kind of doing a big restructuring of the leadership of the company, and they've done a lot since. They've been hiring hundreds of new staff, and she joined at the same time as their new head of live games. So she joined when they were doing a big restructure of the company, of the leadership team, and in general, they've been hiring hundreds of staff. And she also joined the same time as Sarah Buck, their new head of live games, who's actually recently been named Chief Live Games Officer. I reached out to Supercell because she actually left in September, so it's at least a month or two ago. But Supercell didn't get back, so there's no like official comment on the matter. But interesting that that's happened. I don't know if they're looking for a replacement or they're just going to get rid of that role. That she was their first ever CMO. Maybe they're just changing the structure a bit. I couldn't say, what is it reaction to? Obviously, some of their games have been doing really well, but Squad Busters isn't the big launch that they wanted, and that was a massive. They got in like some A-list celebrities, or some of the A-list, I guess. But for a big trailer, they had 40 million pre-registrations, and the game hasn't taken off. Is that a marketing problem? Is that a design problem? Is it both? But yeah. Other big news. So the CEO and COO of Elictus, a Turkey-based developer, have left the company 11 years after founding it. This is more like a kind of, I guess, a good news story in the sense that they've had their exit. They were bought by SciPlay for $100 million in 2022. I think that could have risen to even more from an announcement. I can't remember. And yeah, now they've left. I guess onto their next thing. But I guess congrats to them for building a big, great company, and I'm excited to see what they do next. The Spyber co-founder Ollie Shaper is stepping down as CEO from the company. They were acquired by the Sandbox. So again, it's kind of another exit for someone. And then the other big news in terms of jobs movers was the Stillfront CEO, Jürgen Larsen, has left the publisher 14 years after founding it. President of Publishing and Business Acceleration, Alexis Bonte, is taking on the top role on an interim basis while a successor is found. It's interesting that he's Jurgen's leaving after last month. They announced they were kind of basically had a new organizational structure and splitting it into 3 divisions, which was Europe, North America, and MENA/APAC, each with their own leaders. I think they're searching for a leader they're searching for an EVP for North America at the moment. And I assume it's related. The company's, I guess, largely struggling. If such things generally matter, the share price has crashed quite a lot, and I think it's another one of those roll-up companies that has a lot of talented teams, but it's just what do you do with all of those, and can they keep making successes? So. Yeah, a big week for jobs news. There was plenty of others. Exola signed. Sound like I'm on Sky Sports. Exola has appointed Zoran Vasiliev, Senior VP of Global Strategic Partnerships, and we have plenty of other stories. I'll do a link in the description below. There's other movers and shakers from throughout the month in there as well, so do check that out. Other news. So Plants vs. Zombies 3 is undergoing a major overhaul. So EA is taking it offline, and they're just going to make some significant changes. I think it goes offline in November, and I'm curious what they're going to do. So that game has been through a lot. So it was just in soft launch. They've cancelled it because obviously the soft launch, I guess, has not gone to their expectations or met their KPIs. It was first soft launch, or at least announced, I think, in 2020. So it has been through a few iterations, and they're still working on it. I'm a massive fan of the original Plants vs Zombies, so hopefully they could do something interesting with it. Curious what form it comes back in. I guess my broader point is that it's interesting just in the wider context of EA's mobile strategy, and it kind of, on the one hand, it kind of seems like EA doesn't really care about mobile, right? These days, they've cancelled a lot of games, but maybe they would say they're refocusing. But FIFA's doing like better than ever, and they said that's now their blueprint. So I'm just curious.
Well, FC FC, isn't it?
I say it every time, don't I? FIFA. Every time I just can't remember the new name. I have to look it up. EA Sports FC. Is that it?
I think so. Yeah, and
FC
then FC
Mobile.
Mobile. Yeah,
Yeah. I just it's not as
it's
catchy.
not. Yeah, not
Or
particularly
after
good.
30 years of knowing it, or however
Yeah.
long of knowing it as FIFA, I cannot get over it. It was a good move for them to actually get rid of the FIFA license, considering the cost, and they're the only really the only football game in town. But my goodness, I just can't get used to it. But anyway, the moral point was, yeah, like they're rolling back a lot. Glue. I don't really know what's going on with Glue Mobile at all anymore. I don't know where those resources have been kind of put. They're doing some sim stuff on mobile. Is it focusing on their own IPs? Is interesting, and ultimately with Plants vs Zombies, if it's a game that just wasn't going to work out, then they've absolutely done the right thing. The difficult thing, which is to just take it back to the drawing board. But yeah, it's a tough time for EA's mobile strategy.
Hmm. I have to admit, I've never played the original Plants vs Zombies, but I
No
have
way.
played. I have played the second one.
Do you know? I actually don't think I played the second one. Oddly,
Oh, right.
but the original I loved. I played it to death. It was just fantastic concept. So some other news. So Fun Plus has opened a studio in Lisbon. They hope to recruit about 50 staff. It's headed up by a former Ubisoft creative director, and the focus of this studio in Lisbon is they're kind of looking at ways to bring Fun Plus's IP, which includes State of Survival, Sea of Conquest, kind of games like that. Trying to bring those into transmedia projects. So specifically, they noted, they're eyeing up film, TV, and comics, and they actually have a comic based on a comic series based on Sea of Conquest is their first project. Curious how that pans out because these are Fun Plus has some really really big successful games. Can you translate those into film and TV? They obviously think you can. Be interested to see what happens because everyone loves zombies. So State of Survival, maybe you could do something with it. There's always a new zombie thing out. Uh, I was going to say The Walking Dead kind of cornered the market on TV, but then obviously I'm forgetting The Last of Us, which was actually an incredible TV series, and also The Walking Dead got absolutely terrible towards the end. But yeah, just interesting that they're getting on that kind of trend. And then lastly from me, but there's quite a few of them, I'm going to quick fire some investment stories from the past week. So Loot Labs has raised $6 million in a seed round towards its digital collectibles platform, as he used to say. Krafton has led an investment round in India studio DevTouch to scale King of Cricket and develop new games. Saudi-based UMX studio has secured $4.5 million investment from Jetapult to expand its portfolio. Windwalk has raised $4.5 million and it's launched its superfan social software platform Harbor. AI-powered player feedback platform LiveAware Labs has landed $4.8 million investment. Uh, there is another big investment story that we'll get onto shortly, which was actually the biggest of the week. But I'll leave that to you, Aaron. You've got a couple of stories here. What have you got?
Yeah. So, first of all, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I spoke with Unity's Ryan Ellis earlier in the week. So we talked about Unity 6 finally releasing, and it's been 9 years already since Unity 5. So that was 2015 that came out. And obviously there have been kind of new releases since then, with kind of a yearly release tag, I guess you could say. You've had like Unity 2018, 19, so on and so on. But yeah, almost a decade later, there is the proper Unity 6, I guess, following on from 2015's Unity 5. So automatically, just in the name, feels like the big new update. I think it also reflects the company's commitment to developers based on what Ryan Ellis was saying. And it feels like quite a clear message of kind of going back to basics, putting the customers first, they've confirmed the runtime fee won't be coming back, and Ellis said it, quote, was not aligned with Unity's goal, which apparently is to drive its customers' success. So, yeah, it seems like they're really trying to move on from all the runtime fee fiasco and say, like, we're here for the developers. It's not just about making as much money as possible. And as for the new features in Unity 6, I'd recommend reading the full article on it, because there's a lot of detail in there. But a handful of new features includes, there's a new AI tool called Sprite Enhancer, which sounds quite interesting. And they've got the GPU resident drawer and spatial temporal post-processing, and a whole load of stuff that I'd suggest going and reading the full story on.
It's interesting. They've definitely got their PR marketing team on all of this, and they've got their messaging down because it's the same stuff. Like the CEO was saying about that the runtime fee didn't align with their, I guess, core mantra, which is supposed to be democratization. And I mentioned a while back that the democratization thing that they're trying to democratize game development for everyone, which has been their motto, I guess, kind of since they were founded, is in itself, a PR marketing tool. But actually, it kind of really resonated, and it did make sense with what the company was actually doing. That was their strategy. And then with the runtime fee, and maybe a bit before that, maybe we've gone public as well. I think there was the sense that it was losing that, and so now they're going on this big charm offensive. New CEO, cancel runtime fee, and now, I thought it was interesting. They're going back to Unity 6 instead of the 2017, 2018, 2019. I forgot about that. And Unity 5 was so long ago. I think when you say back to basics, that is kind of what they're doing, kind of trying to go back to what they were. Let's not forget that the license fees are quite, is it 25 up to, I think it's like up to 25% more now, or at least in Unity 6, maybe, I can't remember now. It's going up. So I mean, everyone's waiting to see, I think, with bated breath how Unity does over the next year. I think they've still burnt a lot of bridges. I think some developers would have moved on already. There was a really interesting quote that we had when we were asking for feedback about the runtime fees cancellation, and Rami Ismail said something along the lines of, this is not a direct quote, but he said, like, the one thing an engine company has to do is make you believe that it will stay around, that it will stay in business. And with the runtime fee and the whole messaging of, we need to make money. Yeah, we know that, obviously, but like, it kind of made it sound like an existential threat if they didn't do it. So now it's like, well, okay, is Unity actually going to stick around forever? Which is kind of ridiculous, almost a ridiculous thing to say, but it needs to. Games projects take so long to make, and you build up a development team with the expertise for that kind of coding language, that engine, that you need that engine to. You need to be very much reassured that that business is, one, not going to just suddenly change business terms overnight. Obviously, we've gone through this loads before, but that it's actually going to exist into the future. I'm interested. Like, I think for developers for Unity 6, it really needs to be, you're not just adding loads of features, because that's been a big criticism of Unity. I'm sure some developers love some of the new features, but the other one is like, well, no, you've got to fix the old stuff that's wrong. And then also, the 1,800 layoffs, quarter of the company, and I get that they have closed some of those divisions, but if you're going to lay off that many people, does that affect how much you can add and how much you can fix? So the next year is really, really, to state the obvious, the next year is really crucial, and Unity 6 is a big one. It needs to go well for this charm offensive to work.
Yeah. And I think we've discussed it a lot before, but all the runtime fee kind of controversy, I'm sure the effects of that are still going to be felt for quite some time, because there will have been a lot of developers midway through a project who couldn't really leave partway through, and it's kind of whether Unity 6 will make them reconsider and actually stay afterwards, or whether they'll still kind of move on to another engine for their future project.
It would seem that they must have cancelled the runtime because it took so long. It took a year to cancel it, and I think Matt Bromberg had been in the role for at least a few months before it was cancelled. So they must have seen something coming up that suggested that, oh, okay, this is a total guess, but like, yeah, we're losing developers here. We need to change things now. And I think I said before, like, if they're going to raise the fee by 25%, I guess in their financials, it might cover up like lost developers with extra revenue from the current ones that they have. Yeah, but yeah, everyone kind of wishes Unity well, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yes. So next from me, as you kind of alluded to, Craig, we've got some more investment news, and this is a pretty big one. So ex Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes general manager Mark Otero has raised a huge $42 million in a funding round for Azra Games, which is his new studio. So yes, you heard that right, folks. That was 42 million. So they're currently working on an RPG aimed at Western audiences. That seems to kind of be their niche, I suppose, because obviously RPGs are massive in like Asia. And what this one's doing differently to try and appeal to more of the Western players is that it's not going with the kind of anime aesthetic that has really been a big thing for quite some time now. In the RPG genre, especially. So they're kind of harkening back to Western, like 70s media, like Conan the Barbarian. Before my time, of course. I imagine that's before your time, Craig.
70s is just before, yeah. I'm an 80s child.
It was a good era, I'm told. Good music, but
First Alien film came out in the 70s.
Oh right, oh.
So it must have been a good decade.
Yeah, but yeah, so I asked Otero a couple of questions regarding the funding round. It's obviously, yeah, 42 million is a lot. So he talked about what he's calling the fourth generation of mobile RPGs, and he believes that the genre is going to kind of lead the way in making cross-platform and cross-play an increasingly prevalent part of the games landscape. So yeah, I'd recommend checking out. We've got an article on the investment itself, and then an article of me asking Otero a few questions and getting a bit more into what he believes the fourth generation kind of means for RPGs on mobile. But yeah, just quite an interesting one, and the fact that they were able to raise that much money towards this.
Yeah, he's definitely got. So Mark Otero, he's definitely got the credentials, having kind of been the GM of Capital Games EA when they were making Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I was slightly fuming this week when we ran the story of the interview, and then after it kind of comes out that it's Web 3, but we weren't like told. It was like 42 million. That's incredible. And yeah, well, yeah, obviously it makes sense if it's Web 3, because that always raises kind of stupid sums of money, regardless of the project. I feel sometimes
it's still a lot, I think, even in that. But yeah, it does. It does
just makes more sense, right? I should have spotted it because the absolute giveaway was in the press release beforehand, which said one of the investors. Well, maybe a few of them would have been the red. I was going to say red flags. That's the absolute wrong way to say that. Would have been the
indicators.
Yeah, it would have indicated, because one of them was A16Z, but like the crypto arm rather than the gaming arm, I think. Right. So that was. I mean, I just didn't see it. But yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and we'll see how that does. It's hard to tell at the moment what from the artwork that we got what what it'll ultimately look like. I was saying I remember. It's not a slight on the game at all, but Raid Shadow Legends. I spoke with them before it was kind of released, they're telling me about this big RPG, how amazing it is. It very much reminds me of this. And then you play it, and it's still great, but it's not like the open world RPG that I thought it might be. It's you kind of going along on a set path repeatedly through like dungeons. So yeah,
Yeah. This
not much
podcast isn't sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends.
not yet.
Not yet. Next week, get in touch. Anyway, so yeah, last one from me on the news front. So Hoya versus Genshin Impact has surpassed an estimated 5 billion just on mobile and just in mainland China, according to Nico Partners. They've noted that over 2.2 billion in player spending has come from iOS in China. That's based on Sensor Tower data. And then Nico Partners have estimated the kind of remainder from spending on third-party app stores in China. So yeah, they've estimated that it's made 5 billion there. Again, that's just on mobile, which is obviously a huge sum. Ties back into what I was saying, that RPGs are very big in Asia. Obviously, Genshin Impact is among the biggest, I think it's safe to say. It's projected to surpass 4 billion on mobile outside of China this year as well. So Nico Partners think that it's on track to reach 10 billion across iOS and Android next year globally, which obviously is a lot of money.
Doing okay. Ranked number 3 in the top 50.
Mm.
Check it out. Yeah, it's just quite incredible. Like you say, not including other platforms. I wonder if actually, I mean, they're the experts. I wonder if 5 billion was just their conservative figure, because I'm sure I've heard in the past, yeah, like Android revenue could be 2 times, but maybe even like 3 times, a bit more than iOS revenue in China. So yeah, doing astonishingly well.
Mm. Which, yeah, I think shows, because I know we talked a few weeks ago about how it's kind of declined over the past year. But, even though it's declining, it's so massive that, yeah, it's still making ridiculous sums of money.
That headline still makes me laugh. Is it running out of steam?
Is it running on fumes or
I'm
something?
running on fumes. That
Yeah.
even better. Even better. Oh, but yeah, still absolutely banking it. I'm sure that will continue for a very long time. Well,
Yeah.
unless it runs out of fumes. All right, so moving on to the week in views section. We're rattling through this week. I wanted to talk a bit about. So the headline is NetEase partners with Bungie for Destiny Rising mobile game. So this has been rumored for a while. I think even leaked like at least a month before, about they might be working on this thing called Destiny Rising. Wonder what that is. So NetEase is developing and going to publish the mobile shooter. It's obviously based on the franchise. It marks the title's first foray into the mobile space. It's described as a free-to-play RPG shooter, so I guess just like the actual game, featuring a number of playable hero characters. It includes a variety of game modes playable in single-player, co-op, and competitive multiplayer. It's actually set in an alternate timeline, exploring the post-Dark Age era. Now, I have played Destiny, but I cannot tell you a single thing about the story. So I don't know how significant that is, but I'm sure it is very. It's set ahead for a limited access closed alpha test in November, and so that is open for registration, or at least it was at the time of writing that. So NetEase, of course, has ties to Bungie. In 2018, it invested $100 million to acquire a minority stake in the studio. That was a few years prior to Sony's $3.6 billion acquisition, which was in 2022. I think if I remember right, that NetEase's investment came about when Bungie kind of split with Activision and kind of took a bit more of their own control over the IP, even though I think Activision still had publishing rights at the time. I'll check that post after saying it. I think that was the timeline of all that. Anyway, so NetEase as a partner does make sense. Getting that outside mobile expertise that a very successful Chinese publisher like NetEase that can also afford to put a big team on it if it needs to. It obviously offers a route into China. They've worked on big IPs before, other than their own, but like they worked with EA on Diablo Immortal, so they're kind of used to those partnerships. EA, Diablo, sorry, they obviously worked with Blizzard on Diablo Immortal, and then I guess a mobile game was probably part of the previous $100 million deal. I'm sure this has been in the works for quite some time. I guess some thoughts like it's a difficult one to know how it will do. To be honest, like for the global market outside of China, it feels very late. So Destiny 2 was first released in 2017, and Bungie, of course, has gone through significant cuts post acquisition by Sony. It's refocused on two games, or two IPs, I guess, Destiny and the upcoming Marathon. The shooter market is still big on mobile. It's not as big as it was, but it still earns billions of dollars a year. But I think a lot of that comes from a few games, which is PUBG Mobile, and then you've got Call of Duty Mobile, Garena. Fortnite could make a comeback for mobile, right? It's in the EU, you can get it again, and I think it's available on web. And then you've got other titles like Crossfire, and you've got Knives Out, and maybe a couple others. It's a very difficult market to get into. Maybe there's room. It's hard to put. I don't know. It's hard to know because it is kind of different from these other games as well. It's not, unless they have the mode. It's not like just a battle royale. It's kind of distinct. So I think there's definitely room in China for that. I'm skeptical otherwise if it could be a blockbuster hit. Maybe it'll do pretty well, but it's an
Yeah, I
interesting
think
one.
having the Destiny name and IP behind it is sure to help more than just a random new game. But yeah, hard to know how much.
Sure, I just maybe I just totally undervalue Destiny as an IP these days. It's obviously again not. It's obviously a very big game, but also they haven't hit like the targets that were set for Destiny 2, which is kind of what
Mm.
led to the restructuring. How feasible those targets were, I don't know, but it's just like is now the good time to release it again in China? Probably just get it out on mobile there, and I'm sure, and then it'll probably make loads of money.
Mm.
But elsewhere, I don't know. Hopefully it does really well for them, but not sure.
Keep an eye out for our inevitable articles on its financial
Day one revenue,
success.
week
Yeah.
one revenue, first 2 weeks. Yeah, we
Mm.
we've got the playbook already for this stuff. Um, yeah, so that's yeah. I just thought that was an interesting big story of the week to cover. So Aaron, what have you got?
Yeah, so I've got. I think this is an interesting one, because it's kind of bad. Well, it is bad news, but there's an interesting side to it. So it's a really weird situation. But Game Freak, who make the main series Pokemon games, so they were hacked, and a load of information has come out. The worst thing really being employee information has been exposed. So basically, the hackers were able to acquire the names and email addresses of current and former employees, as well as contracted employees. So obviously, there are big risks, like security risks there for the people affected. Game Freak released a statement confirming that the hack did happen, and they said that over 2,600 items were accessed. They've said they're going to be, I think, supporting the employees in some way, in terms of, I don't quite know what they can do because the information's out there, but yeah, they basically apologised that it's happened, and that's just really bad for all the people involved. Also quite bad is that a load of stuff has apparently been accessed on kind of upcoming Pokemon games and projects. So obviously that's bad news for Game Freak and the Pokemon Company, because they'll have wanted to announce that in their own time with trailers and stuff rather than just people seeing it on the internet. And I'm very spoiler averse in general, so I'm really trying my hardest not to see any of this stuff. But obviously, the internet's a dangerous place. Don't know how long I'm going to manage to avoid it all.
What spoilers can you really get for a Pokemon game?
Like new Pokemon that haven't been revealed yet.
Fair enough. I was thinking more story.
Yeah.
I guess the Pokemon themselves, yeah.
There's usually a story. What if the next game has like 9 gyms? And that would have been really exciting, but then you just read it online.
Or no gyms. Yeah.
Or no gyms. But yeah, so I'm trying to avoid the stuff that hasn't come out yet. But I've seen some of so they accessed a load of beta information for the older games, which is quite interesting. And again, all of this is bad that it happened and that they got hacked. It's the sort of thing that I'd love Game Freak to release in a more official capacity, with like a collection of some of their designs and how like Pokemon changed over time, which they haven't done, but this leak has kind of done it for them. So it is interesting seeing Pokemon that changed by the time they came out and like how they initially looked in the old games, in earlier betas, and then some designs that were scrapped entirely, or like there's one sprite from a like 2002 beta that kind of looks like a Pokemon that didn't exist till like 2011, and there's quite a few like that sort of suggests the amount of time that goes into getting a design right, and if they're not happy with it, they'll just not use it in that game and work on it and eventually do something with it down the line. So I say it's really interesting from just a development standpoint and the work that goes into creating the Pokemon designs, which I guess, well, maybe goes to show why Pokemon characters are kind of as popular as they are and as marketable as they are, if they're spending this much time getting them right. And if you see one that's kind of iterated on through these different betas that have leaked, but it wasn't from that game, it's from a later game, and they carried on working on them. So yeah, it's interesting in that way. And some that had different evolutions before that just don't exist now, and it's like that. It's so bizarre that it was going to evolve into this different thing, or from a different thing, but like, we've always known it the way it ended up being, which makes sense. But yeah, it's bizarre and interesting to see, but very unfortunate, how we've come to see it.
Like how, they go through all these different iterations of these Pokemon and that, and then you still end up with like a pair of keys Pokemon, or a trash Pokemon, or
yeah, there are some that are like the latest game just had a flamingo, which is just a flamingo, and it's called Flamigo, just missing the air, and like that's it. It's just a flamingo. So it's like, it is funny that one makes the cut, and then there's some old like really interesting design.
It's like, hey David, we've only got 149. We need one more. We've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I jest because I love Pokemon, and I think there's no other game really. They try, but I think no other game really gets like generally like the cool designs you can get in Pokemon. I think it's just an age thing where I'm like, oh, the first generations were the best ones, because I feel like some of them have got a bit more, I don't know, ridiculous as time's gone on. I can't really put that into words, what I'm trying to say, but I don't know. They're not
I think they were probably
the
simpler.
Pocket Monsters. Yeah, that's it. They're not like the Pocket Monsters that they were. Some of them are like, I don't know, they're all maybe even more humanoid sometimes. I don't really like those ones. Although obviously the original generation had Mr. Mime, Jinx, etc. So, but yeah, but in general, yeah, I love it. And anyway, but like with hack stuff, it just always seems to happen, doesn't it? With big companies, obviously the big PlayStation hack leaked everything, and I'm kind of shocked about the employee information getting leaked with that, because I feel like it's always bad whatever happens, but usually it's for some reason hackers want to get they want to see what's going on first before it's announced.
Mm.
But yeah, that is a major problem. It's one of those things as well. Like, how much can you do? I think obviously years ago in PlayStation, a different hack when it was like users affected. Maybe the security procedures that they had in place weren't strong enough. With this, you just wonder, like, did Game Freak, do reasonably what it should be doing to secure that data or not? I don't know. And then if they were, though, in the end, what can you do if someone's gonna really try? Sometimes they can get
Yeah.
in. So right. So that brings us to the end of this week's Week in Mobile Games. I remembered the name of the podcast we do every week this week. For listeners, I don't know what happened to me the other last week. There's about 2 minutes of me trying to think, like, what's our podcast called? Is it the Week in Views? No, that's what we first called it. For those that have stuck around for long enough, there's a good few episodes we called it the Week in Views, which is based on an article on the site. And then I was like, why don't you just call it the Week in Mobile Games? That makes so much more sense. And then I was like, the Week in News? I don't know. Lose my mind towards the end of the week, more so than usual. Yeah, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you very much, Aaron, for your insights.
Yeah, thank you. That's been interesting. Lots of news this week.
Yeah, lots going on. And I'm sure there'll be even more next week. So that's a good segue to please tune in again next week for more. Until then, have a good weekend. And we'll see you soon. Thanks very much. Goodbye.